Suddenly, 350 men jumped to their feet and said, "I will." Hiram said, "I thought so. Okay, everybody sit down." He goes, "The way I see it tonight, nobody can cross the river." In other words, the river is a divider between the states. And he said, "I'm going to need to rent steamboats. I'm going to need some of you on logs. I don't care if it looks like a kid or a woman. We're shutting down that river. Nobody crosses the river." He says, "I'm going to need more cannons." You know, he's prepared for this just major war. He said, I'm going to need wagons, extra supplies. I need men in the forests. I need some to go up to Dixon, you know, to make sure the family and any other details. And he said, to be able to finance this, I'm going to need about $700 or $800. And he said, does anybody have that kind of money? Suddenly, Brigham Young now jumps up. And Brigham Young stood about 5'10". He had red hair, freckles, and he has just returned from a mission in England, and he is poor. The word apostle means one who is sent. So if you know an apostle and he's home too long, you go, "Come on, go, go, go." Okay, and you'd say when he went on that mission to England, he'd given his coat away during the extermination order to someone that was poor, so all he has is a quilt on his back. He now stands up and he says, "Hiram, I will finance the whole thing." And suddenly everybody starts laughing because they go, "Oh, wow, the guy that can't even get his own coat is now willing to finance the whole thing." And everybody's kind of laughing. The tension kind of goes out of the room for a moment, and then it appears everyone laughs but Hiram Smith. He now says, "Brigham, this is serious." He goes, "I need to close down that river. I need steamboats. I need, you know, more cannons. I need horses." And Brigham said, "Could you give me a moment, Hiram?" He now faces the group and he says, "All of you know that I'm a poor man." And everybody knew that. He said, "But I want you to know I'm also an honest man." And he said, "My best friend has just been kidnapped." And he said, "What I'd like you to do, I'm going to take off my hat." He said, "I'm going to pass it up and down the rows. And if you have any money that you now have on your person, will you put it in the hat and then let me know afterwards how much I owe you, and I'll gladly pay you back." Suddenly, you know, people are throwing money into the hat. Over $1,000 comes forward. Brigham then passes the hat to Hiram and said, "See, Hiram, I told you I could finance the whole thing. Let's go." Well, okay, so men are now assigned, you know, you got to give it to the guys that are holding a log and swimming up and down the river, because they're going to keep the people on the shores. They've got steamboats, they picked up other cannons, they've got men in the forest, and they sent 40 men now up to Dixon, where Joseph was kidnapped, that town. Well, okay, meantime, I'm going to focus on the 40 men. The 40 men are going up the main river road, and that's actually the name of the road, and it's still called that today, River Road. Okay. They're heading up River Road, which is, you know, their shortest way, and we leave them there, and we turn our attention back to Joseph, who's been kidnapped. Well, okay, the kidnappers have got away from the farmhouse, all right? But when they got away from the farmhouse, you know how you've done something and nobody else could have done it? And they're now, you know, struggling to pat themselves on the back even more. You know, they actually go into the town square of Dixon. They even have a judge come out and see. Everybody come see, you know, who is the Nauvoo Legion? Who is the army against us? Who are the bodyguards against us? You know, it's like, you know, they're just struggling to cheer themselves on. Well, all right. Meantime, Joseph, remember, he's all tied down in the wagon. The two kidnappers conclude, you know, the cheapest way to get across the river is that we need to go farther down the river where it's more narrow, and we'll go farther down the river on this Great River Road. But the problem is the Great River Road actually goes right through Nauvoo. And you go, are you guys dumb? Ever heard the movie Dumb, Dumber, Dumbest? You know, I think this one wins. You know, because you're going, what are you doing? You're going straight down this road, and what you're going to find, you've got over 350 men that have jumped to their feet saying they would shed their own blood to protect then Joseph Smith. So these kidnappers, at one point, they even stop and they get something to eat. They leave Joseph tied down at the wagon. People where they're eating at a tavern, they now come out, they're seeing, they're pinching, and then finally they go, well, okay, let's just kind of mosey on down the road. Well, as they're moseying down this main river road, you got 40 men that are now rushing up to Dixon. And suddenly you'd say, kidnappers, now literally, boom, here they are. Suddenly, here's your 40 guns against 2 guns, and I mean, those guys are dumb, but you would say 40 against 2, they easily drop their guns, and the 40 now friends of Joseph, now they say to the kidnappers, undo Joseph. In other words, take off the rope. The rope is now taken off of where he's been tied up, and these 40 men conclude, let's see the length of the rope. It seems to me there is enough rope here that literally we can hang these 2 guys at the nearest trees. Now you realize Joseph has to diffuse this. In other words, emotions are getting pretty high. He indicates that no, he doesn't want these 2 men dead, but in fact, he experiences a momentary gratitude that they have rescued him from the family vacation. So, in other words, well, I'm out of my sister-in-law's house, thank you. There's a momentary, hey, I got to get back to what I normally like to do. And, but he indicates that, no, he doesn't want these men dead. He said, in fact, why don't we take them into Nauvoo, and as they hosted me, he said, I would like to host them. Now, by this point in Joseph's life, he's a pretty big man. He's 6 feet tall, and he was known as portly. What does that mean? Okay, he's starting to kind of fill out his bones, okay. And by this point, he indicates that he's very hungry. And he's now hearing from the men. He says, oh, get the people out of the steamboats, and get them out of the river, and get them out of the forest, and he says, well, by the way, as you hurry now to Nauvoo to tell the word, he said, could you ask the women if they have been cooking anything today, could they bring it out on the streets so that when I come into town, I'd like to start eating from the moment I hit town. Kind of, I would describe me on fast day. Whatever's not, nailed down, in the refrigerator, it's mine, and oh, did you say dinner? It's in 20 minutes, great, okay. So it's like, here comes Joseph into town. As he comes into town, he's on a horse, and you'd say the horse next to him is the Sheriff Wilson from Carthage. On the other side is Sheriff Reynolds from Independence. So suddenly, here are the women on the streets, they're passing food, and then they're saying, oh, we're so glad you're back, who are these men? Joseph then announces all along what soon becomes a parade, with, you'd say, Joseph is like the center float, he's the homecoming queen, he's the football team, he's the whole reason for being there. And all along the route, Joseph says, oh, who are these people? They are my kidnappers. Now, Latter-day Saints back then had a hard time being calm. And suddenly a lot was said to the kidnappers on this route. Joseph then indicated that when he arrived at his home, if there could be then a dinner prepared. So notice he's eating once he hits town. Now he's really eating at dinner. At the course of dinner, he insists that the 2 sheriffs sit next to him. Finally, as the dinner is now progressing, Joseph will turn to Sheriff Reynolds of Independence and say to the sheriff, Sheriff, I have hosted you. In other words, you have been my guest. I have hosted you for about as long as you hosted me, as he was in the wagon. Joseph will then say to the man, I no longer wish to spare your life. He will then say, if I were you, I would leave Nauvoo immediately. Now, you don't get either man saying, could you hold that thought, brownies are coming. The donuts, I can smell it. Don't hold that. All of a sudden you get both men now quickly leaving from Joseph's house. For Sheriff Wilson, he now goes back to Carthage, the county seat. For Sheriff Reynolds, he doesn't care anymore how much it costs to get across that river. He is across, he wants to be in his own state of Missouri. Well, we're going to feature now Sheriff Reynolds. As Sheriff Reynolds arrives in Missouri, he has a story to tell. Now, try and imagine if there were not movie theaters, if you did not have television, if you couldn't text, whatever you got going that kind of keeps you entertained, there was nothing bigger by the Mississippi River than storytellers. And so you'd show in town, you go, I have a story to tell, and people would come out. Well, in every little tiny town, as he crosses the state towards independence, he has a story to tell. And his story is, I had Joe. I was so close. And, people are there, and, you were close. Remember, these are the same people that had pushed the Mormons out of their state. When he gets to independence, Sheriff Reynolds is feeling pretty popular. In other words, storytellers are cheered, they love him, but once he hits independence, he now goes to see this now Senator Boggs. What was Senator Boggs known as in the Senate? Man, his head is full of balls because he's always pushing out the buckshot that had gone in his face. Hey, truly, sir. Well, okay. As he arrives now in Independence, he goes to see Boggs and he says, I have a story to tell you. And Boggs said, I've heard it. He goes, I don't want to hear it again. In other words, he goes, how could you have been on the main river road? Everything, and Boggs is furious. And he says to Sheriff Reynolds, I've gathered that money. And he said, all that money I've gathered from Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa, I'm going to make sure you don't even get one dime. At which point, Joseph Reynolds says, I don't want any money anymore. In other words, so watch this. Here's Boggs. He has two chips. One is money. What was the other thing that Reynolds says, yeah, I'm going to do this? Okay, to run for governor. So all of a sudden you'd say, Boggs only has one chip left, and he says, well, I tell you what, I will make sure that no matter what happens, you never become governor of this state. At which point Sheriff Reynolds says, I don't want to be governor. And you're like, wow, buddy, you did all this. You went up there. You were going to get money. You were going to get political, da-da. And he goes, no, he says, I don't want that. At which point Boggs now says, well, what do you want then? And he says, I want Joseph dead, and I'm going back. Now, okay, I would describe, my dad, when I was growing up, he used to say, you're going off half-baked. Okay, what does that mean? You're not really prepared. You really haven't thought this out. You've taken the cookies out too early, or the cake, and angel food cake, and it's all, Yeah, in other words, you're half-baked, or you'd also say the word half-cocked. In other words, you don't really have your gun ready. You're only part way, and it's not going to do you any good because you haven't planned it. And so I would say for Sheriff Reynolds, he was an enemy. But tell me, do you think he was scary? No. It's kind of like the fly where you're like, he's just bugging me. I'm going to get rid of it, but he's not scary. Will he be scary the next time? Oh, yeah. Because now, guess what? He's going to plan. He's going to figure it out because he wants Joseph what? He wants Joseph dead. He's been humiliated. He's been a laughingstock. Boggs thinks, how could you have done that? And all of a sudden this time, he's really going to think it out. Well, okay, if you're going to premeditate something, he wants to this time, he wants to take every man he can in the whole state of Missouri. So now he's got to be the think tank. How does he do it? His conclusion is every man in the state has what occupation? Okay, are they a blacksmith? No. Well, what's your job in the 19th century? Okay, good. Thank you, Pablo. Everybody's a farmer. In other words, you may be a blacksmith on the side, a school teacher on the side, but your bread and butter always comes from the land. And so as he thinks about it, his conclusion is, I'm going to go back in 43, but I can't go back in the spring. How come? What does the farmer do in the spring? Oh, no. Okay, good. Okay, plants his crops. Okay, and then how come you can't take the farmer in the summer? No, yeah, okay, summer. Okay, you got to water. You know, you ever been to Weeder, and you know if those tomatoes are really going to be something, or papayas, whatever we're doing, you know, you got to make sure you're caring for it, the right nutrients in the soil. But when can you take the farmer, Brian?
Got to be the winter.
Perfect. Okay. So you'd say he thinks about this, and his conclusion is, I can take the farmer after he has the harvest of his crop. In other words, it's wheat's up, corn's up, whatever it is, and you'd say, when does a farmer seem to have some time off? And you'd say, oh, winter months. So he's thought it out pretty good. He now stands up at the main square in Independence. And so remember, who had we heard speak at the main square in Independence? Joseph. Okay, and all of a sudden at that same square, you now get Joseph Reynolds stands up and he says, I'm going back. Who's with me? Several men said, I can go, but he's got to die this winter. When does Joseph really die? June. Okay, so he's talking winter of 43, and can you see how frustrated these farmers are going to be because Joseph doesn't die till June 27th, and suddenly, you know, you're like, hey, I'm going to miss the planting season. You know, come on, we got to get him. What are you doing? It's going to, you know, okay. So he then says, who's with me? Some of the men says, I can leave tonight. In other words, let's go. Others said, you know, I want to, but I'm telling you, the little woman says, I got to put on a new roof. Okay. I've got to move out my fence. You know, I'm a squatter on the land. I'm going to claim more land area. Others will say, no, I've got to do this and this. I've got to mend the fences, but I want to come. Where can I meet you? And his phrase was, meet me in Carthage. And meet me in Carthage became like a household phrase, that everybody could say that phrase all through the state of Missouri. Meet me in Carthage actually made it all the way up to New York. Meet me in Carthage made it in Ohio, and suddenly the word on the street was, if you want to help kill Joseph, meet me where? Meet me in Carthage. What was the extent of this Joseph Reynolds? Joseph Reynolds now crosses the state, and remember all those little towns where he was your storyteller? He's back. He's telling the same story, and he says, I didn't finish the job. Who's with me? Several said, I'm coming, but where can I meet you? Meet me in Carthage. What was his extent? By the time he's ready to cross the Mississippi, and he's at St. Louis, he's got 1,800 men. Okay, what are you about to look at? You know, just blow it right out of the water. You could look at a huge war. And with others saying, meet me in Carthage. Well, suddenly these men go up to Carthage, but as they go up to Carthage, they conclude they don't want to kind of melt in with everybody else. You know, they want to keep separate. In other words, they are not there in Carthage to get jobs, go to school, be a part of their society. They are there to kill the mayor in the town 23 miles away. I mean, try and imagine, you know, what's that town down here that's about 23 miles away? Okay, good. I can never say that. Alieva, no. Okay, well, one of those. Okay, so try and imagine, what would it be like over here if you knew there were 1,800 men, and daily they're being added to, and you'd say, why are they there? And they're there because they want to kill somebody in our town. Tell me, would you be ready to leave? Probably. Okay, so in the meantime, these men, to keep themselves separate from others in town, they will take upon themselves a blanket name, which means all of them took the same name, and it was Wolf Hunter. And you'd say, well, what's a wolf hunter? Their feeling is that Joseph Smith was a wolf, and all of his followers were sheep. And if you could kill the wolf, then the sheep, they could go back, they could be great Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterian, Catholics, they could be anything, because guess what? You've gotten the wolf out of their pack. Okay, so they called themselves wolf hunters. In the meantime, they started doing little raids onto Nauvoo. And whenever they would capture a man, woman, or child, they only asked two questions, and actually it just comes down to the basics. The same things they'd asked him Missouri before. Is Joseph a what? Prophet. And is the Book of Mormon what? The Word of God. If you're a man, you're physically abused. And usually, end of a gun, they're going to hit you a whip. If you're a woman, you're subject to be physically, verbally abused. And what's going to happen if you're a child? You're going to be kidnapped because you're just going to grow up to be a Mormon. Well, Joseph Smith, now mayor of the town, he's worried for the people in his town. And he begins issuing what you would call like mayor's orders. And one order was, men, if you need to go out to your farms this winter, which farms were always on the edge of town, you go with guns and you go with friends. I don't want to hear any of you are going out by yourself. For women, he's now saying there's like a curfew on this town. What does that mean? Be home by dark. And if you need to walk after dark, you make sure you are in the company of a man. In other words, protect yourself. Wolf hunters are in our midst. For the parents, he's saying, parents, you walk your children to school, home from school, music lessons, you know at all times where your children are. Wolf hunters are in your midst. Then at one point, one of his friends said, are you worried for your life because of all the wolf hunters that are now gathering to Carthage? Joseph says no. He goes, my life is of more danger from a fool in this town than from all my enemies that gather to Carthage. In other words, notice every time Joseph's hurt, tar and feathering, it's someone who has been baptized. And, you could say, you kind of walk him through all those things. People that testified against him in Richmond, people who had at one point said he was a prophet. So Joseph's saying no. He goes, I'm not worried about Reynolds or all those people that are coming to Carthage. Who's he worried about? Okay, he's worried about his friends. Which one of them is not really a friend that will turn his heel? Well, okay, everyone, break. And we will, the next hour, we're going to talk about teenagers that saved his life and who was that fool in town. And I think, Pablo, you find that movie interesting. Okay, good.
And the test.
And we will also, yes, we will go through on how you did on the test. Actually, you made me proud, so thank you. And thank my cute family for coming to visit. Okay, good. Thank you. We have a chair. Good.